Welcome to the May Plant Lovers. No, this isn't the Plant Lovers Torch. I'm sorry. I'm so used to doing those.
It's whatever you want it to be today.
We regret that Tony Avon is not going to be able to give this presentation today, and I hope he will come back at some point and do it and give his own perspective on this topic. He's certainly much more knowledgeable about this topic than I am, but there's some really fun plants to highlight that fit within the range of prickly plants. And as we go through the garden, we might stop and visit some non-prickly plants as well. I'm standing here next to an agave. The genus Agave is a large genus. It's a New World genus native to Southwest US and Mexico and parts of Central America. Some species are fully winter hardy in zone 7. Some species occur in tropical areas of Mexico. This is Agave asperima, aspera meaning rough. And if you were here and ran your hand on the surface of the leaf, it feels like a fine grade sandpaper. Agaves are often called century plants because it's thought that it takes them 100 years to bloom, which is far from the case. Though in a very arid climate, where they occur in the wild, they often do take far longer to get to blooming size than they do in the east, where they enjoy much more moisture. There are some dryland plants that must be dry, but there are a lot of dryland plants that tolerate drought, but will make use of every bit of water that they get. And I believe it was David Creech from Stephen F. Austin University in Eastern Tennessee one time, many years ago, visiting Plant Delight's nursery here in Raleigh, mentioned that he thought the agaves grown in this climate were producing about as much growth in 1 year as they do in their native dryland habitat in 10 years. So provided they have good drainage, they will make use of every bit of water that they receive. The other thing that many people know or think they know about agaves is that they die after they bloom. It's a situation known as being monocarpic, mono being one and carp is fruit, that they just flower and fruit once. And agaves fall into two types of growth habits. There's some, like this Agave asperima, that spread underground and produce additional plants. All of these plants are connected to the original plant that was planted years ago here. And so though this rosette will die, it'll probably start dying late this year as the inflorescence is done blooming and set seed. But these non-blooming rosettes will not die. But the agaves that tend to make just one rosette and do not offset, when they're finished blooming, most of those species, the entire plant will be dead. I might wait a moment until the train's gone by.
We can't hear the train at all, so you can keep talking.
I always have trouble pronouncing it tequila, which is made from the juice of the succulent leaves in the trunk. It's an alcoholic beverage that's been made in Mexico for many hundreds of years, possibly thousands of years. I'm moving over here to this prickly pear. Prickly pears are in the genus Opuntia. And most people are surprised to learn that there are prickly pears that are native to North Carolina. This particular species is Opuntia humifusa, and it's native from Ontario into the center part of the country and all the way south on the East Coast to Florida. I've certainly seen it on the coast and on Cape Cod. This is a really nice selection. The cultivar is Sunshine. It's just starting to bloom, but if you look at the edge of the pads, you see these are all flower buds. So, you know, a week from now, when a whole bunch of flowers are in full bloom, you'll hardly even see the plant. And they are called prickly pears because the fruit are somewhat pear-shaped and they are edible. Though I do need to make the point that a lot of prickly pear fruit have spines on the outside of the fruit. So you want to peel them before you pop them in your mouth. I think we'll move on to some other plants now. The genus Yucca is closely related to the genus Agave. And many decades ago, they were all in the lily family. The lily family was sort of a catch-all family for many plants. And briefly, the agaves were moved to the agave family, but that family doesn't exist anymore. So many of these changes in the classification of organisms has occurred because of modern DNA analysis. Classical taxonomy, the classification of organisms was based on morphology. Well, sometimes things that look somewhat alike, actually, when you analyze their DNA, they're actually quite different. And the agaves, the yuccas, and related genera like the dazzlerians and beschernerias are now in the asparagus family, based on DNA analysis. I do think that the inflorescences of agaves and yuccas before they start branching out do look a lot like asparagus, but that has absolutely no bearing on their classification. This is Yucca rostrata, which is a species that forms a trunk. Many yucca species don't develop much of a trunk. They're just rosettes at ground level. But this is, it's a fairly harmless one. Some yuccas and probably nearly all the agaves are very fiercely thorned. But Yucca rostrata is one of the most beautiful of the yuccas. And it's also fairly cold hardy. It's certainly reliable in zone, even in the colder end of zone 7. I don't know if it goes into colder climates than that. We won't linger over this type of yucca, but this is the yucca that most of us know. And just like there are a few species of yucca native to North Carolina and the East Coast, Yucca filamentosa and Yucca flaccida also occur on the East Coast. Okay.
Before we move on, Doug,
Yes.
we have a request to see the trunk of Yucca rostrata. Can
Okay.
you talk about that?
Yeah. This is another specimen of Yucca rostrata. I'm well over 3 feet tall, so you see it's they do get fairly tall, and that's good and solid. They do retain their own leaves. You know, nice grass skirt on this one. And the thing about, well, like Yucca aloeifolia, which is another one with a woody trunk. I've always seen Yucca rostrata manage to stand up, but Yucca aloeifolia is one of those plants that can only get so tall when it exceeds its ability to stand upright. It sort of slumps outward, and you can cut them off and just stick the rootless trunk in the ground and they'll root. You know, just treat it as a gigantic cutting. I'll be the typical gardener and say, you should have seen my garden last week. Well, you should have seen these beschernerias last week. And, you know, if you're scared of the scientific names of plants, just keep in mind that a lot of plant names are actually family names. And I don't know how well you can see this label in this glaring sun, but Beschorner is somebody's family name. It's a lot like the Swiss side of my family, whose family name was Chantre and spelled T-S-C-H. But the Beschorneries are another closely related genus. they're certainly one of the showiest in bloom, but these are 90% past bloom. And when these stems were younger, they were as bright red as these young stems up here. And the flowers are green and red. They don't make a trunk, just these basal rosettes. And a few steps up the hill, yet another genus, related genus, the red yuccas or false yuccas, Hesper aloe. Hesper referring to the evening, and aloe because the foliage is arrow-like. They have this quite narrow foliage that's completely harmless. I think this is a plant of Yucca campanulata. Yucca parviflora is the one that's more common in gardens, and these bloom for many months, and they're highly favored by hummingbirds. And I have not yet seen a hummingbird this summer, though I've had reports of others. Chris, not at all prickly, so off topic, but certainly suited to a xeric garden, a dry garden, are the various ice plants. This is a new selection, lavender ice. The flowers are closed in the morning, but they open once the sun is shining on them. And this is our first year with it in the ground, so I'm not sure how long it'll bloom, but many of the best of the ice plants we grow bloom all summer long. The genus is Delosperma. It's a fairly large genus of plants native to South Africa. And many of them are winter hardy, not all of them. But some selections were made at the Denver Botanic Garden, which is a whole lot colder than here. This is, as tall as they get, but they spread some faster than others. All right, we'll head down this way. We won't linger here, but since we just visited that one ice plant, this is our flowering lawn, a planting of very low growing flowering plants, and the big sweeps of sort of magenta colored flowers is a species of ice plant, Delosperma cooperi, and that's one that we've grown for many decades, and it's really fully reliable and it'll bloom pretty much all summer.
Well, looks like Chris is having to reboot Doug, and will rejoin us as soon as they get that technology going again. That's always the fun of these online things. Never quite know what might happen. Hopefully they'll be back up with us soon. While they're getting that ready, I just want to apologize. I know we had advertised that Tony was going to be with us. He wasn't able to make it, and I had to leave town unexpectedly as well. But I did want to talk at the end. One of the big programs we have coming up is our Southeastern Plant Symposium on June 12th. It's a full day of speakers. It will be online, but will be recorded, so anybody who registers can attend. But we have some just absolutely phenomenal speakers. Fergus Garrett from Great Dixter, who is one of the great gardeners of the world. We have something I'm really interested. Stephen Barstow is from Norway. He's written a book called Around the World in 80 Plants, and his book is all about edimentals, as he calls them, ornamental edibles. And I mean, there are just tons of things that you're probably already growing that you don't even know could be edible. The rest of the speakers, there are a bunch of them that are fantastic. I hope you'll go to our website and look at that. And of course, along with that will be a fantastic plant auction. We're starting to get the plants in for the auction now, and it's some pretty exciting stuff. Looks like Chris may be getting back on. If he is, Chris, just take over whenever if you get back on here. All right.
Doug, you're
You
ready to go again.
Okay. We're standing here in front of a Dazzlerion. It's another genus related to the other genera we've met today. Nearly all the Dazzlerions are characterized by a sawtooth edge on both edges of the leaf. So they're not plants you move around real quickly because they will cut you, but they're beautiful architectural plants. In bloom, it's a really tall spike like on the agaves, and lots of little, not all that colorful plants, but flowers that the pollinators really like. And pollinators really like the agave flowers as well. And in the wild, some of the most important pollinators of agaves are hummingbirds and bats, because in the wild, agaves, aren't growing cheek by jowl, but you might have a group of agaves in one location and then the next one, is a quarter mile away. So smaller pollinators like bees and butterflies don't travel that far, but bats and hummingbirds do. But when this bloomed last year, you could hear all the bees working the flowers. And I mentioned that agave is the source of tequila. Well, one of the common name of Dazzlerions is sotol, S-O-T-O-L, and that is also an alcoholic beverage. Fermented much like they do tequila, but I think far less common. The agaves, the different species of agaves hybridize readily. It's thought that maybe that's because it's a fairly young genus, like maybe only a few million years old or some such thing. And I don't know if this particular hybrid, Mr. Ripple's, I believe. Yeah, Mr. Ripple was created in a garden or whether it was this individual found in the wild, but the species do hybridize. But this is a beautiful architectural one with these big wavy leaves. And a fun thing about the agaves is how the teeth on the edge of the leaves leave an impression on the younger leaf inside. It's really beautiful patterning. Let's see that. This, believe it or not, this shrub here is actually a species of ash, Fraxinus. And over here, we have a small growing agave that's starting to bloom. It's Agave flexispina. I don't know that that spine is all that flexible, but somebody named it that. And this is a species where this rosette will die, but the pups will continue on. A very handsome agave hybrid. I assume a man-made hybrid. Maybe if Tony was here, he'd tell you whether or not this is one he made. This is a hybrid between Agave Victoria Reginae, which we'll meet in a few moments, and Agave lechugia, which is a species native to, I think, around the Grand Canyon and that parts of Southwest US. Both are fairly small growing species. This leaf is really stiff and very thick. It doesn't have the pretty marking of one of its parents, Victoria Reginae, but it's a handsome architectural plant. We will see a few cactus in bloom today. Again, you should have seen the cactus last week. There were a lot more in bloom. This is one of the little Echinocereus. Cereus is a genus of cactus. Echino is referring to spines, like hedgehogs. And this has bright scarlet flowers. Here's a spent flower. But this is a very cold hardy species. This is, there are some, part of the genus opuntia was separated into its own genus. The cactus species that are still opuntias are the ones with broad, flat pads, but the ones with these cylindrical stems are now in the genus Cylindropuntia or Cylindropuntia, meaning cylindrical. And some of these species look like they're ferociously spined, but the truth of the matter is that some cactus have a huge number of spines to sort of shade the plant. And I discovered this by accident, but some of these you can sort of, these don't even pierce the skin. And this isn't an overly spiny ones, but there's some species of Cylindropuntia that are, you hardly can see the stems of the plants because the spines are that prominent. And I should say that in cactus, except for a few primitive ones who have leaves, and some cactus who have very ephemeral leaves when they first put out new growth, they don't have leaves, and instead the part of the plant that is
So it looks like some more technical problems. We have internet issues sometimes near the buildings where it tries to go, tries to use the Wi-Fi and then wants to go off the Wi-Fi. So sorry about that, but they'll be right back with us, I am sure, pretty quickly. So I'll keep talking about what I was before in terms of the Southeastern Plant Symposium. The registration is open now for that. The auction starts on June 3rd at 3 o'clock and will go right through to the end of the symposium at 5 o'clock on June 12th. So I encourage you to check that out. Got any questions? Oh, thank you, Arlene. Arlene put the link in the chat. If there are any questions about any of the plants that Doug has talked about, I'm happy to chat about those as well. Yeah, Arlene mentions that we will be mailing the smaller auction plants for this as well. So gallon and under plants we will mail to you within the lower 48 states. Some of the other speakers include Aaron Floden from the Missouri Botanic Garden, Peter Zale from Longwood Botanic Gardens, who's going to be talking about hardy orchids. Got Irene Palmer, who works with Tom Ranney up in the mountains doing plant breeding. Hans Hansen, who's one of the great perennial plant breeders, and we've been talking about we're talking about agaves. If you've seen the mangaves, the agave manfreda hybrids with the soft leaves and all the spots, they look like kind of kinder, gentler agaves. Those all come from Hans Hansen's breeding work with agave, and a lot of the pollen from that comes from both here and Tony Avon's place at Juniper Level Botanic Garden.
Yep,
Excellent.
we are back.
Turn it back over to you.
The Wi-Fi turned off again. I'm sorry, everyone, for that. We are now on the Education Center's Wi-Fi, and we're just going to stay close to the building.
Okay.
Doug, you can go.
Yeah. I should add that only a fool goes around patting cactus to see if their spines are mean or not. And certainly one of the nastiest of all cactus is another Cylindropuntia, the jumping cholla. And those spines will get to your flesh. They're really hard to remove, but it's not just the spine that's going to be attached to you. It'll be a piece of the stem. And you might think, well, why is the plant tolerating being broken up? Well, if you were coyote or some other animal or human or horse out in the desert and one of those jumping choyas attached to you, and you ran off. Well, the plant is getting distributed that way. It's another means of dispersal. Most plants disperse by fruit and the seeds in the fruit, but some plants readily break and travel that way. Indeed, one of the other species of opuntia that's native to North Carolina and a good part of North America is opuntia fragilis, meaning fragile. And it too is one that breaks freely and travels on the coat of an animal or other creature. This is an agave that's very harmless. There's no terminal spine. There's no sawtooth edge to the leaf, and the leaves are very flexible. This is Agave bracteosa. The plant looks a little bit stressed. I'm thinking that this might actually be a species that would prefer a little shade. In the desert, a lot of the smaller cactus and other succulents will grow in the shade of maybe on the north side of a big rock or under a shrub or something like that. So maybe we'll transplant a bit of this to a shadier location and see if it's happier. Agave lophantha is a small growing agave. I think even the wild type has a lighter green center to the leaf blade. It's one that suckers real readily. You could grow it as a ground cover if you wanted to. This is a real pretty selection called quadricolor because of the 4 colors of the leaf blade. Though I'm a little bit hard pressed to count more than 3, but there's dark green, light green, and yellow, but a really pretty thing. And as far as the height of the plant, this is full size. It's probably not quite a foot tall. Oh, and we have not a prickly plant, but another plant native to the Southwest US. This is the plant who has the common name of fried egg plant, and I'm sure you can see why. That's a big flower, poppy relative, but not in that same genus. It's in the genus Romnea. I'm sure named for somebody named Romney. Romnea coulteri, I believe. And it spreads underground. It can get, 6 feet tall, and it blooms for an extended period of time. These are its big flower buds. This is maybe its first flower of the year, but a lovely thing. And we met the hybrid agave a few minutes ago that has as one of its parents Agave Victoria reginae. And Victoria reginae is honoring Queen Victoria, and reginae meaning of the queen. And you can see there are no offsets, and it is starting to put up a flower stalk. So it is my guess that when this blooms, the whole plant's going to die, which is kind of sad because it's such a beautiful rosette.
Doug, we have a question in the chat from Gregory. He's wondering how the Romnea was established. Was that done from seed or a potted plant, or how did we get that?
I do not know how it was established. That might be in our plant database. If Gregory wants to send me an email, I can look it up in our plant database.
It was a young plant.
So
It was a young plant.
Romneas in the Ralston Arboretum were planted by JCs, so a long time ago.
Mark just confirmed that was a small plant when we planted it.
Okay, perfect. And our next door neighbor here is another species of yucca rupicola. The tall flower stalks are really quite elegant, I think. We met the big Dazzlerian burlandi area. This is Dazzlerian texanum. Does anyone guess where Dazzlerian texanum is from? It's a smaller growing species. And one thing I might add about the Dazzlerian, some of them remain just basal rosettes and others eventually develop a trunk. And I believe I'm correct in saying that Dazzlerians are dioecious. They're either male or female, so we don't get fruit set on a lot of them because We just have one plant of one species in a close enough proximity. Okay. Oh, not prickly, but I sure do want to show you this plant. This often surprises people. There are a number of ferns that want to grow out in the hot sun. This is one of the little lip ferns, Chilanthes, and this one, that's about as big as it gets, but if it gets really dry, they will sort of shrivel up, but then perk back up once there's a rain. So, you know, I think a lot of visitors see that and think, my goodness, those gardeners are idiots. They planted a fern in the sun, but there are ferns that want to grow in the sun. And
I don't know about you all, but Doug just had all the interns in stitches over here. It was pretty funny.
oh, well, you know, I ran into that when I recommended a geranium for a shade garden, because everybody knows that geraniums want sun. Well, some do and some don't. This is a smaller growing agave, Agave perii. I think that was its name. Yeah, perii. You know, the rosettes can get a bit bigger. I think it's also a real beautiful one with these blue-gray leaves and the very dark teeth on the edges. But a real handsome rosette of foliage.
Mm-hmm.
I think perii is the one that there's that one selection named for JC. Mark, is nolina in the same family as the agaves and the yuccas and things? I imagine it is. I just didn't verify it. And I was doing a little
Yes.
research.
Mark said yes.
Yes.
Thank you. The nolinas are the bear grasses. These developing inflorescence will get another few feet taller, and their foliage is fairly slender, but evergreen. There are one or two species of nolina native to the East Coast, but a far larger number of them in the Southwest. This is nolina longifolia. Not, you know, super showy in bloom, but pleasant in an architectural way. In English garden books, one learns about sea hollies. Sea hollies are Eryngium, and they're not at all related to hollies. The leaves are just holly-like on the European species. And where was I going with that? But in North America and Central America, there are a lot of very drought tolerant species. This one isn't labeled, but there are other similar species like Eryngium venustum and stuff like that. And they're a little bit prickly. It's like playing with a litter of kittens, but they're not at all related to these other plants. They're actually in the same family as carrots and parsley and fennel and stuff. So it's a big scape like on these nolinas, but then they have these spherical little heads of flowers. And some of these Southwest native ones are evergreen. This is one of my greatest one of my favorite new plants in the Arboretum. Most of you would recognize this as an aloe. It's the soap aloe. The name used to be Aloe saponaria referring to soap. I imagine the viscous sap of the crushed leaves would probably make a lather or something like that. It's now has a new name, Aloe maculata. If you think of the word immaculate, well, immaculate means unspotted or blemish free, while maculata means spotted, so just the opposite of immaculate. And this is a selection called Fort Worth because it was selected for its cold hardiness, because probably a run-of-the-mill plant of Aloe maculata would not be winter hardy. These bloom just like this, last October into November. I was really surprised to see them blooming again this time of year.
Mhm.
We had, when we originally planted this 2 years ago, let's see, they've gone through 2 winters. The ones in another location didn't fare well, but they really have taken to this spot. I think a little bit of overhead canopy gives them a little bit additional protection. I suspect if the hummingbird showed up in this garden that they would visit this riddle. Not at all spiny, but native to the Southwest US and Mexico is this pipevine. And one of the common swallowtail butterflies is the pipevine swallowtail, so called because the caterpillars only eat pipevines. And here's probably an almost full-grown caterpillar. I'm sure the first brood, but later in the year, the caterpillars usually completely defoliate this plant. And though this plant is pretty a fairly slow plant, the has a single carrot-like root underground, which I think has enough stored food so the plant can tolerate being completely defoliated because it'll quickly regrow and get defoliated again. But the pipevines are called let me hold this better, are called pipevines because it's like one of those Dutch meerschaum pipes that didn't go out straight, but rather curved down and then back up again. And this particular pipevine, the genus is Aristolochia, Aristo as in aristocracy and Lochia referring to birth. And another common name is birthwort because the European species were used to encourage a good birth. But this species is Aristolochia fimbriata because of the fringe to the petals of the flower, but a real fun flower. I noticed these have already made fruit. So these have already made fruit. Looks like a little gherkin cucumber, or maybe that little Mexican cucumber that doesn't get any bigger than this. But when these open, they look like a wonderful sort of parachute. They split from the top and they're like 5-parted or so, and the seeds are inside. It's real easy from seed. And one of our native Aristolochia is a very vigorous vine that's a little bit difficult to manage in a small garden. So if you want to support our native pipevine swallowtails, this is a well-behaved little plant. We're on top of the Ruby McSwain Education Building at the Arboretum. The rooftop is in sun all day long. What's the matter? No problem. The rooftop is in sun all day. The beds have some depth to them, but the soil is primarily this gray gravel, this permatill, stay-light permatill. It's a North Carolina product. It's a waste product from, what was it, making concrete or something? It's shale that's been expanded at high temperatures, sort of like Rice Krispies or popcorn. And it's useful in this application because it's quite light, so it didn't add a lot of weight to these beds on top of the roof. And the soil mix varies somewhat from bed to bed, but it's permatill and sand or permatill and maybe compost or something like that. And it can be very dry if it's not raining. You know, our native clay soil holds water for a while, but this area doesn't. So, you know, one of the best bits of advice for any gardener is don't fight the site. Well, this is a site that tends to be dry. And so instead of planting water lilies up here, we plant the most drought tolerant of plants, such as cactus. And a week ago, there was quite a diversity of cactus blooming. Today, there's maybe about 5 different species of Notocactus in bloom. And the Notocactus are native to South America, high in the mountains and cold tolerant, so they go through the winter just fine. All of the ones blooming today are yellow flowered. And so I'll show you multiple ones and you'll probably think I'm showing you the same one over and over again. This is Notocactus schlosseri. Their armature and the growth habit of the plant is probably more varied than the flowers, but it's a sweet little thing. And then Notocactus submamulosa has these strongly ribbed body and these fewer spines, but very strong downward arching spines. And these are, this is their second full growing season. And last year they already started seeding around a little bit. I don't know if I'd find any babies right here, but no, that's not one. Anyhow, but their Plantalites Nursery sells some winter hardy cactus, but there are other mail order nurseries that specialize in cold hardy cactus. We're zone 7, but there are some cactus that will survive even in zone 5 or 6. But when you get into zone 7, the number of different species of cactus that can be grown is quite large. And many of them are very beautiful, even if they're not in bloom, like these echinocereus, densely spined. And yeah, they're not bad at all, but just, again, that many spines make me think that the spines are more about shading the body of the plant than really protecting it. So I guess if you wouldn't munch down on that. Okay, yeah, we have another Notocactus here. Now this is Notocactus mamulosa. We just saw submamulosa. And, you know, some groups of plants are more, present more problems with, you know, finding what the correct name is. And cactus might be one of the worst groups. They're constantly being reclassified and lumped together and divided again. But you see, its spination is similar to submamulosa. Flowers are similar. All right. Oh, the little Talinum is starting. These weren't open an hour ago when I was up here preparing for this, but this little plant used to be in the genus Talinum, but it's now in the genus Femaranthus. Femer as in ephemeral, anthus being flower, and they open about this time in the afternoon, and they'll be open. I don't know when they close. They're open the rest of the day at least. I think they're closed by the time we get here. And this little tuft of cylindrical green leaves is all that it does, but it'll bloom for certainly all summer long. And it's native to shale barrens in like the Midwest or so. Super, super easy. It does seed around some. It's such a slight little plant that I don't think you'd ever mind having it come up here and there. Some of these little echinocereus, even these small plants, these flowers were about like that big. Cactus often seem to have two basic types of strategy, either large numbers of small flowers or a few really big ones. But the echinocereus are real showy in bloom. Here's the little Femaranthus again, but you can see these are all seedlings of it. I don't mind them because, you know, something's going to grow, and so I'm happy to have that, rather have them than weed seeds. These weren't open an hour ago either. This is closely related to the Femaranthus, as you might guess, because the flowers are almost identical. This is Anacampseros rufescens. Rufescens would be becoming sort of rusty red. Well, maybe that's referring to the foliage. And Tony Avent, the guest speaker we were planning on today, often shares plants, very often shares plants with the Arboretum. And Tony's always, well, the Arboretum does the same thing too, is always testing plants to see if they're suitable for this climate. And there are many things that he shared with the Arboretum that really surprised us when they proved to be winter hardy. These have gone through 3 winters. They, you know, the plants haven't become great big plants, but they've gone through 3 winters and they bloom every year. Glad we were up at this time. Yet another Notocactus, consinus. And I might just mention this particularly Echinocereus. I've mentioned that a lot of them are real showy in bloom. This one's flowers are fairly small and they're bright green, but it's one of the most cold hardy cactus. You know, it was, Tim collected this in Colorado, certainly fully hardy in zone 6 and probably into zone 5. The genus Mammillaria is commonly grown as houseplants. It's quite a large genus of cactus, and actually that one's not alive, that rotted out. It's the exoskeleton, sort of like when you find the exoskeleton of an insect. And many of the mammillarias that are grown as houseplants will tolerate light frost, but not a full-fledged zone 7 winter. And this past winter was their first winter. And I hope they make it. The mammillarias most of them have small flowers, but a lot of them have really pretty bodies like these fuzzy ones here. And, you know, the first cactus we met today was the opuntia humilis, but I've mentioned opuntia fragilis. This is, I believe, Plant Delight's nursery named this selection potato. These wonderful chubby little stems. I'm hoping that this will become a broad mat like I've seen in that Plant Delight's nursery. Here's a real beautiful, well, you can see the label Wigginsii, I'm sure named after somebody named Wiggins. Can pull that one guy out. Now, we're a little behind on our labeling in the garden, partly because in 2020 we had so little help in the garden. And it might be that this genus no longer exists and it's lumped with one of the others, but real handsome body to that plant, but gorgeous flowers. I wish you could smell the foliage on this, I think this is Thymus marum, kitty crack. Nice fragrance to it. How are we doing for time?
We're about 1 hour.
What?
We are at about 1 hour.
Do we want to continue?
We'll just do a couple more.
Okay.
Because we had a couple unplanned intermissions.
Oh, that's right. We did. Okay. All right. This, I mentioned the opuntias that are now in their own genus, the cylindropuntias. This is a year-old plant that I saw a moment ago, but now it's retreated. Okay, here it is. This is Cylindropuntia imbricata, variety arborescens. And you know, what is Arbor Day? It's a celebration of trees. So this is variety arborescens. So this one's going to get about 5 feet tall. And it's inermis. This wasn't, no, it is the cultivar inermis. Inermis means spineless. And we are thankful when a Cylindropuntia is spineless, but that's going to get about 5 feet tall. And some of the opuntias and Cylindropuntias have showy red fruit that persists through the winter months. This is a very small growing cactus. It's Escobaria. I'm sure that's somebody's family name, Escobar. Actually, there's 2 species of Escobaria, and this one is Missouriensis, meaning from Missouri, and it is native to the upper Midwest. So very cold hardy. It's bloomed already. They were small, sort of yellowy white flowers. Really odd little cactus. Is this one back here? Mehunia. It has fairly prominent leaves at this time of year, the bright green cylindrical leaves you see. But you see the stems, probably when the summer turns really hot and dry, it'll shed those leaves, and then the rest of the year it'll just be these fairly brownish colored stems. And it has bloomed, looks like it's making some fruit, but they were good sized butter yellow flowers on this little plant. And that's another genus that's native to South America. And here's a really good example of Opuntia fragilis. This little guy up here. Opuntia fragilis is very variable. And we have a clone from, I think it was from Michigan, that's real tiny, but this is sort of a medium-sized one. And in this area, we have quite a few non-prickly plants in bloom. A really nice selection of ice plants. This bright magenta one, its cultivar name is Blut, B-L-U-T, which is German for blood. My blood's never run that color. And a foxglove we really like. It looks very much like the common Digitalis purpurea, but it's a close related species, Digitalis thapsi, which is T-H-A-P-S-I. The two species are closely related enough so when they're grown near enough with each other, they will hybridize. The reason why we like this one so much is this one is perennial. These plants are a number of years old. And I would love to always succeed with Digitalis purpurea, the common foxglove, but usually just before it's about to come into full bloom, the plants leave the garden. So this is a shorter growing thing and not at its best right now because we're very dry. I hope everyone in the audience will do a rain garden for us. I mean, a rain dance for us.
Doug?
Yes.
That's about all the time we have, but I
Okay.
was wondering if you just wanted to talk about what the crevice garden is all about, since we're right here and it's looking extra special, and what kind of advantages a garden like that has for plants like we've been showing today.
You must be mistaking me for Chris. I mean, for Tim. The crevice garden. There are a number of plants, especially alpine plants, that they don't object so much to our climate, but what they need is super, super good drainage. And so the stones are set vertically, an extremely well draining mix is, placed in between the stones, and then they send their roots down deep where I guess they probably stay cooler. And so we do succeed with some things that you could never succeed with if you planted them in our native clay-based soils. And our native clay-based soils are wonderful for the plants that want a soil with meat to it, but a lot of other plants have evolved to, and they require very sharp drainage. Do you this than me, probably, Chris? Do you have anything to add to that?
I have nothing to add. You're the star of the show today, Doug.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Doug. How about if we take just a few moments for some questions and some answers? You can ask them in the chat, but I do have my volume up, so Doug should be able to hear you too. Oh, they're quiet in the chat and in speaking wise, so we'll go ahead and end it there. Thank you so much, Doug. We're glad that you can fill in at the last moment. We had a great tour with you, looking at some agaves, prickly plants, and some other nice surprise plants as we went along on the trip. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Do apologize for our technical difficulties, but we made it through, and we had some good unplanned intermissions where Mark filled you in for our upcoming symposiums. Hope you can join us for that program. We really thank you for coming out today, and hopefully we'll see you in the garden soon. And of course, don't forget the pop-up plant sale tomorrow, 2 p.m. through 7 p.m. We'll see you then. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.